Okay, so here's a short presentation about the elder tree. Today, 13th of September 2022, we're transitioning from the days of blackthorn into the days of elder. And elder is the third goddess, if you like, of the triple goddess of the Ogham Grove. I've got a diagram to show you a little later on, but from a zodiac perspective, the goddess sign in the zodiac is Virgo. She's the only female constellation, if you like, and the ancient world saw her as the queen of the gods and so on. And all of the Virgo goddesses were the great mother, like the Virgin Mary herself, and also the goddesses of Virgo, like Demeter and Persephone and Ceres, Ceridwen, were the goddesses of the ancient mystery traditions. Now, looking at her as a three-aspected goddess, the elder is the final phase, and from some perspectives, the crone aspect or the grandmother aspect. And they're quite interesting then that folklore names for the elder tree include old lady, Lady Elhorn. It's an interesting name. I quite like that, Lady Elhorn. Also the elder queen and the elder mother. And in Northern Europe, like Denmark, the elder mother, quite important. She's the queen of the elves, you know, not tiny little pixie things, but think more Lord of the Rings, you know, the noble shining ones, the spirits of the land, you know. So the elder queen is the queen of the spirits of the land in that way. And that's quite interesting too, because blackthorn, which is today transitioning into elder, a lovely name for blackthorn is La Mère de Bois. I still need to look into that because I don't know if it's from Brittany or France, but if it's Breton, that's really interesting. And it means mother of the woods. So you've got blackthorn being mother of the woods and elder being the old lady and queen of the elves in Northern Europe. Now, probably, I mean, there's tons of stuff about it. I'm really interested in the herbalism, but there isn't time to go into that. But what I am thinking is that next year, when we go through the cycle of the year, I might focus more on the herbalism and medicine of each tree. This year's kind of been mainly looking at star law, and I find the star law very important, and it's something I know about, whereas I don't have much knowledge about the herbalism, but it's something I would like to explore. And I think elder is one of those really important, precious commodities at the end of summer. You know, the medicinal value from the elder tree, not just in its berries, but in its leaves and bark as a pain management thing, as well as the vitamins in the berries. There's all sorts of taboo about not cutting down any elder. And that says to me that it's very, very useful and should be left alone, you know. So magically it might be important, like Queen of the Elves, but also you don't chop down your medicine cabinet. That's just really silly, you know. So there were all sorts of taboos about not cutting down elder unless you really, really had to. And there's even scary stories that, like, if a baby's crib was made of elder wood, they would get battered and bruised and stolen by the fairies. Someone's microphone's on. So yeah, along with the medicine side, then there's a whole load of witchcraft law with the elder tree. The witches of Ireland are said to have used elder as the main shaft of their broomsticks, their besoms. You know, the elder was the favoured wood for that. And the most famous story probably in England of witchery and the elder tree is for the famous stone circle called the Rollrights in Oxfordshire, where a king and his army were transformed into standing stones, and the witch at the end of the story turns herself into an elder tree. You know, so there's always this connection with the elder and witches and the old lady and the queen of the elves and so on. So just going quickly to the Irish Briatheroum, doesn't give us any lore to do with Queen of the Elves or witchery. The Briatheroisms are all saying the same thing. They're talking about the face becoming red for various reasons. Each kenning is a slightly different reason, but it's about the reddening of the face. And I would say that the reddening is the juice of the berries. You know, if you squeeze them in your fist, you got like blood red juice all over your hands. So you could easily war paint yourself. And the berries are used for dyeing, but they make a kind of purple lilac color rather than red. So for red faces, it can only be the juice smeared over the face. But anyway, here are the three kennings from the Briatheroum. The first one is most intense of blushing. So it's the redness of blushing intensely. The second one just says reddening of faces. That could be the same meaning of blushing. And the third one says the glow of anger. So like your face is all red with anger, you know. But all three of them are kind of saying a big red face for blushing or anger or whatever. And the Scholar's Primer gives a slightly different reason for the redness of the face. It actually says the redness of shame, embarrassment, I suppose, or shame. But either way, all four of those explanations are the face going red because of anger, shame, blushing, whatever it is. The Ogham name is Rhys, which means red. So you know, red is what they're all sticking with. So it's just red and red face. You know, Rhys. In Cumbria, there's a town called Penrith. It's the same word. Pen just means hill, and Rhys is red. So there's a red hill in Penrith. It's named after the red hill. And in Cornwall, there's a town called Red Ruth, and Ruth is the same as wreath, and Rhys, you know, Ruth is Cornish for red. So the town of Red Ruth in Cornwall is actually red. Now, the red from the English and Ruth from the Cornish, Red Ruth, red. So make of that what you will. The star law then, elder, goes from today, which is the 21st degree of Virgo, and I'm going to show you a diagram in a minute and explain things in detail. And it goes to the 9th degree of Libra, and in the middle of that, in the middle of her 18 days, each tree has 18 days roughly, is autumn equinox. So elder, the Queen of the Fairies, the old lady, she takes us into the dark half of the year, takes us past autumn equinox, and that's really quite important for the mystery school teachings and things. So there's a whole energy of descent, as in descending downwards. From a tarot perspective, she's also the cusp between Virgo and Libra. And Virgo is the maiden and Libra is the scales. So if you visualize a maiden holding scales, that's your tarot trump justice, you know. So we'll go into that a little bit, you know, as well. Now, tomorrow when I put info up on the Facebook page. I'll put this poem up by Fiona MacLeod, and the poem's called "The Washer at the Ford," and to my mind that's Elder perfectly. I won't read the poem now because it's a bit lengthy, but basically in some Native American traditions there's something called the spirit horse, and if you dream of the spirit horse or have a vision of the spirit horse, it means you're going to die. It means your days are coming to an end, because the spirit horse is going to take you to the next world. And the old lady, the washer at the ford, is a bit similar. And there's two versions of her story. One version is that she's in a ford of a river washing clothes. That's the nice version of the story. The poem I'll put up tomorrow is a much more vivid. She's swishing a sword around and she's hacking up bones and cutting the flesh off the bones and all of this sort of stuff. And both versions mean the same thing, whether she's washing your clothes or hacking up your body. It's because you no longer need your clothes, or you no longer need your body. So the washer of the ford is cutting away everything that no longer serves you, you know, as you transition from this world to the next world. So that's a pretty, you know, frightening thing, I suppose, for lots of people, but it's a story, so you take it symbolically too. So going into rites of initiation, every initiation is about becoming something more evolved from the old you, you know. So the old you is left behind. You're a new you after initiation, you know. So what she kind of represents, I think, is just cutting away everything that no longer serves you. You know, this is the time to just let it go as you move forward into a new cycle, you know, from a Celtic perspective, cycle beginning at Samhain with the seeds going into the ground, you know. So there's an end of the old, the end of the summer, the nights are getting shorter, and she is all of that, you know. So I'll show you the diagrams with that, and it fits in well with the deciduous trees dropping their leaves and all of that kind of thing. So I'll just do the sharing thing. Where's that share screen? Okay, so I did this recently, and if you look at the very bottom of the screen, it has Virgo, and it's all 30 degrees of Virgo. So every zodiac sign has 30 degrees. 30 times 12, so 360, that's your circle. So the circle's 360 degrees. So that's how the sun's ecliptic goes around the year, if you like. So the zodiac divides the ecliptic into 12 signs, but the Ogham divides the ecliptic into 20 trees, you know. So what you have with Virgo is there are 3 trees that have a foot symbolically on Virgo. Broom on the left is mostly Leo, but she has 1 foot on Virgo. So she's part of the great goddess, but she's the kind of golden-haired Leo 9 summer queen. Above Virgo itself is Blackthorn. Blackthorn is completely and utterly Virgo. So she is the great goddess. She's Ceridwen. She's the serial goddess. And the third lady, Elder, where we are today, you see that she's the last 9 degrees of Virgo and the first 9 degrees of Libra. So she's balanced perfectly between Virgo and Libra. She has 9 degrees in each sign, which is why I've colored her kind of black and white. So from autumn equinox onwards, she's just black. you know, her garment is black and her face is hidden on that side. This is representing the sun going into the dark half of the year, which I'll show you more with the next diagram. But from a star lore perspective, then there's all sorts of symbolism that belongs to the triple goddess in this way. For instance, the secondary constellation of Leo is Crater, the wine mixing cup. So with Brune, there's the sacred wine mixing vessel, which is a prototype of the Holy Grail. And from a Celtic perspective, it's the cauldron of Annuin, or it's Ceridwen's cauldron. But it was the vessel for the ritualistic wine that was used maybe with hallucinogenics for people that were going into ancient mystery traditions, where they were going to have and experience visions and dreams, and they would be going to learn about the metaphysical reality of existence. You know, people that went through the ancient mysteries came out of them totally believing that we were much more than just mortal flesh and bone, that we were something much more profound, you know. So somehow they gave people absolute faith in spirit. But each mystery tradition had its own way of doing things, and most of them were sworn to secrecy. So we don't actually know what all the mystery schools did. All that we have are passing references from ancient Greek writers and Roman writers, and we have their statues and their mosaics and their ornaments, you know, so you can figure things out from looking at the statues of the gods and goddesses involved and the stories of the gods and goddesses. But the ancient mystery rites would have been some sort of, like I say, intoxicated theatre experience. And as a member of the audience watching the story unfold, you would experience whatever the god or god was experiencing, and it would be a spiritual encounter, you know, that changes your outlook. So then after the mystery traditions, you become an initiated one, or an initiate. You know, you've been through that rite of passage, if you like. And people in the ancient world, they did a different mystery tradition every year. You know, they might have been doing it one way for a few years, and then it was perfectly okay to try a different mystery school, you know. So people did, they tried different mystery schools all the time and learned whatever they learned from each of those mystery schools. The secondary constellation of Virgo is Corvus the Crow. It's a constellation of the crow, Corvus. And in the story of Taliesin and Ceridwen, Ceridwen's son is called Morvran, and Morvran means the great crow, you know, and her main thing, of course, is her cauldron. And there in the night sky is the great vessel cauldron with a crow next to it. Now, more than that is the symbolism for Virgo is her as a cereal goddess, cereal as in grains of wheat that you make cereals from, you know, bread. So in front of her, I've put a big bushel of wheat. Now there's a bright star in the constellation of Virgo called Spica. And Spica means an ear of wheat. So the goddess Virgo is often just shown holding a single grain ear of wheat in her hand. Now the story of Ceridwen and Taliesin, and remember, one name of the cereal goddess is Ceres or Keris, so Ceridwen is very similar. But after the animal shape-shifting that Ceridwen and Gwion back do, his final shape-shifting is from a bird into a grain of wheat, you know, and he hides himself on a granary floor where there's lots of grains of wheat. But his name, Gwion back, means little bright one, you know, and the bright star of Virgo is Spica, the ear of wheat. Anyway, she spies him and she turns herself into a black hen, not a crow, but a black bird, a black hen, and she eats him as a grain of wheat. You know, so all of that is there. Ceridwen as Ceres, the cauldron as the vessel, her son, the crow, the single ear of wheat, and Gwion turning into a grain of wheat. And here's the most special thing then. So all three ladies are the one goddess, if you like. And after consuming Gwion back as a grain of wheat, he's inside her belly for 9 months. That's clearly written in the story. And then after the 9 months, he's born at Beltane. So you can backstep easy, you know, 9 months before Beltane is Lunacy. And if you look at Broom, the spear that she's holding in her right hand on the far left is 15 degrees Leo, which is Lunacy. So I've given her a spear because of the spear of Lunacy. But that's when Gwion back was consumed at Lunacy to be born at Beltane. So by the Lunacy bride, if you like. They're all interesting stuff. Now, to Elder then, the final phase of the triple goddess, holding the scales of Libra makes her the figure of justice. Now, as I mentioned with the washer up the ford, there is a ceremony from Egyptian descent into the afterlife called the weighing of the heart ceremony. And your heart is weighed against a feather. So symbolically, from an Egyptian perspective, your heart must be as light as a feather. That means no heavy-heartedness, no broken, you know, you must be comfortable with the life journey that you've had, or you must be clean and brand new, and everything that no longer serves you is cut away so that you can be a blank canvas going into the mysteries, if you like. And what's nice too is that the cauldron with Broom, crater, the wine mixing cup, corresponds with the middle cauldron, which is your heart. You know, so at the beginning of the triple goddess, you've got the heavenly cauldron, your heart, your middle cauldron. And then with Elder, there's going to be the weighing of the heart. You know, are you true to yourself? Are you living your vocation? Have you come here to do what you should be doing? If you're not, your heart's going to be heavy and your heart must be light. So I'll give you time to look at this diagram then. So the lower half, there's a horizon line in the middle, and the lower half is shaded. Okay, so if you look at the far left, you'll see ash tree. Now this horizon line between ash and elder on the right, this horizontal line is the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. And the direction of the arrows, so if you look at ash, there's an arrow going upwards. That's the direction the sun takes. And if you look at elder, the arrow is pointing downward. So that's, again, it's the clockwise direction the sun takes. So elder, you can see quite clearly, is going to take the sun, or the initiate, down into the dark months of the year, into the final acme of the Ogham, you know, the 5 vowels, which we're going to be coming to next. So elder is the conclusion of the fruiting time, and she's going to take us into the seeding time. You know, those seeds go into the dark, dark earth and germinate. You know? And that takes us into some very powerful concepts, you know. So like the acme, Aeon, the 4th acme, is the wild heath, and that ties in with the wild hunt and the gathering of souls, and all into Samhain and Scorpio. And then there's the kind of complete death and stillness of winter before rebirth at winter solstice. And winter solstice is the yew tree right at the bottom. So the elder is going to lead us down into the deep and the dark. And then the yew tree is the Yule, it's the wheel, it's the rebirth of the sun. And from that moment, we're back into a new cycle with birch, Ellen of the Ways, and the rising of the energies that will take us up to ash and the spring equinox, and then we're back into the light half of the year again, the endless cycle, if you like. But bear in mind then the path of Gwion back inside Ceridwen for 9 months until he's born at Beltane, so he was swallowed as a grain of wheat at Lunasa between ivy and broom. And then the initiates in the mystery schools, bardic mystery traditions or whatever, are going into the deep, 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 deep. And what will be learnt in the wild heath, and what will be learnt at the winter solstice, and what will be learnt at the water's edge with willow and alder, which is the salmon weir, the salmon of wisdom. So you've got all of that hidden underground, lower cauldron, underworld stuff, inner world stuff, before rebirth at ash and the spring equinox. So elder is that, the old lady, the queen of the elves, the cutter of the cord, the washer at the ford, stripping away all that no longer serves you. Okay, so you can turn your microphones back on and we'll talk about some of those ideas.
One of the last things you said there, Yuri, and thank you for the presentation. It was awesome. One of the last things you said was about just before you said that Elder was the old lady, and you were talking about going down into the mysteries. Oh my God, I forgot. What was it? Something that caught me. I didn't. You just said what will be learned as we go into the deep. Oh right. So how was that related to the lower cauldron? Sorry.
So yeah, there's multi facets to playing with the cauldrons. One aspect of the lower cauldron is that it corresponds with winter solstice.
Right. Yes.
That kind of is the lowest part of your 3 cauldrons, if you like, because the space between your legs for qigong and trigong and all that stuff, it's going to go from between your legs, the winter solstice, the lower part of the lower cauldron, and then as you breathe in, the energy rises up your spinal cord to your pineal gland, which is summer solstice, and then the out breath takes it down again. Now the year does that, or the sun does that. So the sun will be going down to the winter solstice point, and that's as low as it can go, and that's as dark as it can get. And then from that moment, there's a rising of energy back up the spinal cord to spring equinox to summer solstice. So there's a cycle inside of you that happens every time you breathe in and breathe out, and the sun's cycle takes 365 and a quarter days, to do a breathe in, breathe out, but it's the same thing, so that's why I'm relating it to the lower cauldron as that time of year.
I love the diagram you did and having it half. I mean, it's like the high priestess or something. I mean, it looks like the elder with the half.
Yes.
Weighing. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful poster, or what I mean, picture.
I think a lot of priestess artwork shows at least one side of her face hidden, or both her eyes hidden with a veil.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of half of her being in the dark half of the year, or half of her being in the other world. So she's only like half here and half there, sort of thing.
Which is the equinox, right?
Yeah.
That is the equinox.
You know, so the seasonal cycle is that.
Would you have
What
any
I also
idea what?
see in that light and dark half is also the elder with her white blossom.
Yes.
And then now with her dark, nearly black berries, sort of also, that's also, I see that back in that imagery as well.
Yeah.
And also another thing, because you were saying washer at the ford, that made me think here in Scotland, you've got don't know exactly how to pronounce it, the bean near. She's also a sort of an omen of death. You can see her washing bloody clothes in lakes and streams and such.
That's going to be the same sort of thing. So the poem on the Facebook group tomorrow is by Fiona MacLeod. I don't know if you're familiar with Fiona MacLeod writings, but they're all based on Scots Gaelic folklore.
Yeah. So that sounds like it. The bean she's called. It's sort of something like a banshee, the same kind of sort of idea. The banshee is also something like that, but this one's clearly washing the bloody clothes. And what I also see, it's also very interesting, also in your imagery as well, is that in Germany and in Holland, the Germanic countries, sort of thing, they associate the elder with Holle, Holder, Hela. That's all the these are the goddesses of sort of death, and Hela especially as well. That has to do with the scales as well, because when you die in Nordic mythology, you're also, like you say, you get weighed up. Your heart gets weighed up, and it's also very interesting because she's Frau Holle, Holda. But they also, another name is Perchta, and that's a bird goddess. And the idea of her is picking away with her beak all the stuff you don't need, cutting away, a sort of initiation, like you were saying, cutting down to the bone and then going in, naked to the bone, and then down into the mysteries and coming out at the other side, So I thought that's also very fitting for the elder.
No, that is. A lot of ancient cultures practiced what we call excarnation. That's building platforms and putting the dead bodies on the platform, and the birds of prey would just clean the bones. That was done in lots of cultures.
The Heaven's Funeral, it's called, in Tibet. And I would like to add, as I'm German, I'm very familiar and very loving with the elder, and it's still very dominant in our region, and very it still has a big meaning for the people. Really, it's so beautiful. It's one of those ambassadors of the old times to keep the old wisdom. And I always tell people on my herbal tours to be very respectful with the elder. And I could talk about the elder for hours and hours and hours, and people would just love it. And you can see the signature of the elder. It has these bone signatures. Sometimes in wintertime you think that the bush must be dead, and then it's the first leaves in the spring that come out are the leaves of the elder. And we always say that the elder is implying the three qualities of the goddess. So the white, the red, and the black elements are in this bush. Yeah, and I'm really happy. I love this tree so much, and it's such a beautiful. It's a blessing to have it in the garden. So when it comes to your place, you just should never cut it and just honor it. And it's the ancestors who are sitting in the trees, who are taking a little vacancy from the death, they come and they sit in the elder bush, the holler bush, the holder, the house goddess. It's also called in German. The holder is the goddess of the house, and yeah, it's very familiar for the people. They sometimes they don't even know what they are doing, but they are not cutting the tree because no, I don't cut it. I won't cut it, and yeah.
Oh, how
I
nice.
forgot to stop
Lovely.
recording.